Today's August 14, 2024 for most of the day, even though I guess I'm going to end it 2 hours earlier than my Rockies time zone friend here, Daniel Kotzin. Daniel, tell us what's top of mind of late. What have you been thinking about and working on?
Well, because of the Olympics and because some of your viewers may or may not know, I'm going to stand up so you can see my shirt, which says XXXY Athletics. Whoops, there, sort of see it. My wife is Jennifer Say, and she's the founder and CEO of this company, which she founded a few months ago. So it sells really high quality performance clothing, but they are also on a mission to protect women in sports and women's spaces. So I have, although I spent most of the last few years thinking the most about COVID and COVID related issues, just for the past few weeks, I've really started to think a lot more about the transgender issues. So I don't know what your views are on that, actually.
Well, before we transition to either our views on that topic, I mean, my feeling is very well encapsulated. I forget who did the interview. It'll come to me probably. He's asking if you had an anorectic patient in, and the anorectic wanted to have liposuction. Mm-hmm. Because anorectics invariably feel they're overweight. Would you give that anorectic Ozempic? Speaking of the Olympics, with the Ozempics, and would you do liposuction? And if somebody wanted, I don't know, I guess felt like in the internal, he was an internal unexpressed amputee, would you cut his arms off? I mean, these are things that have been done, but mostly in the by Dr. Mengele. I'm serious. I'm not joking. Andrew Clavin says that if Mengele had come up to Hitler with some of the ideas that people are doing now, take 13-year-old boys and girls and try to, kind of flip their genitals outside in or inside out, take off their sex, whatever. I mean, Hitler might say, stick with the, twin, killing off twins or something. I mean, I'm not recommending either, but I think that, my general pathway and frame of mind has been, I'm glad you're interviewing me, by the way. My general pathway and frame of mind has been to, be, I guess, kind of like a lightning rod in a sense. You have to absorb some of the stuff and you have to kind of set people right. I'm an MD, medical doctor. And the second part is doctor means teacher. I guess the, orthodoxy, we see this word doctrine and all that kind of stuff. It means teaching. And if you're not going to be doing teaching and you're only going to be just a cork on the tides of the times, then just be that. But I think you have to have a sense of what is and what is not. And then speaking of XX and XY, I mean, those are, medical terms. And it's kind of sad we've reverted to those, like as if the chromosomes are telling us what we see and feel. And I think that's been kind of a mistake. We keep, kind of drawing the line further and further back.
Interesting. Yeah, I have found actually, I actually tweeted about it recently. Every person that I know of that was immediately opposed to lockdowns, not later, not in the summer, but in the spring of 2020, right away, that said lockdowns were wrong. I know quite a few people like that, hundreds of them, mostly because of Twitter and other places. Every single one of them is opposed to trans rights. There's not. It's as if there's some people that are able to see through a veil of nonsense that somehow manages to fool most people. I used to think, I'm not really sure what it is. You have to be willing to face some opprobrium. We live, Jennifer and I live in a fairly liberal neighborhood in Denver. I put up a couple Trump signs in the yard. I know I'm not the only Trump supporter in the neighborhood, but other people don't put them up. I mean, I know what people are thinking. Some people said, well, what is the gardener going to say? What are the clean? Like, everyone's worried about what people is going to think about them. I don't know how. I'm not like that, but I'm not really sure how people go through life like that, so concerned about what everyone else is thinking. But apparently that's what most people are doing.
Well, the person, from Tiananmen Square, it was in 1989. I mean, there are a couple people, I think they're mostly nameless to us, because they've been, processed and probably turned into Soylent Green, whatever. But the person everyone remembers about Tiananmen Square is the guy who stood up to the tank.
Yeah, I remember him.
By being numerically in the minority at Tiananmen Square, versus the number of military people, was he wrong? There's the old joke. If a guy speaks, if a man speaks and there's no woman around, is he still wrong? That's just a joke, of course. But you can't be contextual. You either, I think there's two different ways of looking at these things. They're either absolutes or they're not. And if everything is only contextual and you can only have truths in the sense, an old public health professor of mine came to my I think it was for the wedding or thereabouts, from Rochester, and his second wife came, and she was kind of in that similar vein. I think she's philosophy PhD or something like that. And they wound up having an argument we had a kind of a factory converted loft. So it's a pretty cool place, but they wound up having this argument that whether there is objective truth.
Of course.
And they're both of the left. They're both people of the left.
Says no. The left says no. This is a whole rabbit hole, but I am formerly a student of linguistics and comparative literature, and those fields, this happened starting a long time ago, 50 years ago. Those fields were taken over by relativists, and that's one of the main arguments. For example, in literature, which I studied, what the writer intended doesn't matter. What the words seem to say do not matter. You can deconstruct any text and find other meanings behind it. And when I was a young man, I thought this was interesting and compelling because I thought what we were doing was deconstructing to find a deeper truth. Mm-hmm. But in fact, they were deconstructing to show that there was no truth of any kind there. And that's why I did not complete my PhD in general and comparative literature in the 1990s, because I realized it was not actually on a quest for truth. It was a quest to deny the existence of truth. And I think we're a generation later, and this is what we're seeing now. I'm in my 50s. So people that are taking over now in power were raised their whole lives believing there is no objective reality. So if you take something as fundamental as male and female, they don't believe that there's a male and female. That's not any sort of objective reality. That's just societal norms. That's why, so to go back, why I think you're interested in having me on again to talk about Trump, why I'm interested sort of on a deeper level and support Trump is I think we need to blow up some of the intellectual edifices on which we're operating right now. They'll lead to a destruction of important, valuable things like human lives and human decency and human dignity. We can't continue. We can't have a society where there's a denial of reality. So this is what I've been thinking about today specifically, Randy. Going on right now, I think, is the Paralympics. It's sort of parallel. It's for disabled people. It parallels the regular Olympics. It's happening in Paris. It happens for summer and winter. It works a little bit differently so that you don't specifically represent your country. So that there's competing right now a man. He's my age. He's a man in his 50s.
I saw the picture.
He's running. And what's really horrifying is he's running in the blind category. Oh. So only 4 people get to run in the 100 and 200. You know why? There's 8 lanes. And if you're actually blind, you can't sprint without a guide, without a man running next to you, guiding you. This man who's running in the women's category only has a limited impairment of his vision. So limited that he doesn't need a guide when he's running. He doesn't seem vision impaired to me. So he took the place of a woman, a young woman. She's 90% vision impaired, meaning she's blind. And this is her hobby. She's a school teacher in Spain. She trains. This is her dream. And instead of her, this 50-year-old loser who's not even blind is taking her spot.
So
And it's being feared by the left. That is what, that's what I'm saying. How can they look at this man and look at the blind woman whose spot he took and say this is a good thing?
Well, is he willing to, you know, if he had his heart and soul, and if he's willing to transition his eyeballs into blindness?
Yeah, I'm old. I'm 55. I don't know how you old are. I've been thinking about how old I am recently, because it's amazing to me that I can remember stuff that happened in the 90s really well. The 90s don't seem like a long time ago to me. I was an adult for all of them. I remember them. But yeah, there was a long period. I worked as a volunteer reader for blind people at Hebrew University in Jerusalem. That's where I was a graduate school and student in several universities. That was one of them. And they have the biggest institute for the blind in the Middle East. Israel has the best institute for many things in the Middle East. Right. And because of that, there are actually many blind students that come and study from all over the Middle East at Hebrew University. And I volunteered. I had a scholarship, but I had to do some volunteer work for it. I was a reader for the blind because I'm a very good reader in English, and I can pronounce difficult words correctly. I'm a native speaker. And there's a lot of text for academics that have not been rendered into Braille. So if you're a blind PhD student in various disciplines, you literally cannot read the text you need to read unless someone reads them out loud to you. So that was what I did. I don't know why I got on this rabbit hole, but I spent several years when I was with blind people a lot. I guess that was my point. Reading to them, but you're also with them. And I guess that's why this story in particular got to me. It really got to me. He stole her spot twice. He stole her spot. She's a woman and she's blind, and he's a man who's not blind. And it really, it's horrible.
This comes back to me to a basic concept of zero-sum games. So this is a term I heard first in the Jimmy Carter era, and I am because of that fact. It's a fact I'm older than you. I met Jimmy Carter when I was in college. He was running for office back then. Anyway, I met him twice actually, but this I don't forget why. But I'd read political things. I didn't know what they're talking about. Zero-sum game. I know how to play games, various games, chess and basketball, whatever. But what is a zero-sum game? Well, that means that something conferred to one person has to come from somebody else. Mm-hmm. So like poker, if you're at a poker party, that's a zero-sum game. All the money that comes into the table leaves the table. The table didn't make any money. Nobody's better off on net.
Yes.
On average, everyone is just as wealthy or poor as when they started. The money might have moved around. So that's a zero-sum game. 6 people playing poker without a house. Without Las Vegas. There are other games, there are other activities that are positive sum, like trade. If you have, let's say we're 2 basketball teams and you have 3 centers and I have 5 guards and you need a guard, I need a center. We make a trade and we actually both benefit. Both our teams get better because I didn't have a center and you didn't have any guards. So we give up something of equal value, say, and we both get better. So that's not a zero-sum game. So trade economics works on positive sum games, basically, if you want to think of trade as a game. And so where am I getting with this? Rights, basic human rights can be a positive sum game, but for the most part, these kind of individual plays and ploys are zero-sum games. So if we grant the right for somebody to have, all the rest of us to use a pronoun, all the rest of us to kind of accede our place, as a woman, in boxing, whatever, to a guy, that guy has the right to, do his thing and express himself, but it comes at a cost. It's frankly a negative sum game because if you count the rights that accrue to the individual and subtract it from the rights given, taken away from the total, this actually goes back to COVID. I think COVID was a negative sum game because certainly some people benefit from a lockdown. My 92-year-old mother-in-law was in our basement. She has since passed on, God bless her soul. But she lived through COVID and only to die, from natural causes afterwards. And we kept her, and she she wanted every vaccine that came by, and God bless her, she could have them all. And it was frankly, neither zero or positive sum for me to have her it was probably positive. She wanted them. I gave it to her. Fine. Everyone's happy. But to have everybody have that same thing because she benefited from it potentially is a negative sum game. And so this comes back to, I don't know, if I like, I'm too lazy. I like, pooping in my pants, and I like swimming at the same time. I wear a diaper to go swimming because I'm an adult identifies as a baby, and I'm in the pool. Who are you to take away my right to express myself? Well, the fact of the matter is you're sullying the pool. And so that's kind of a crude example, but basically this comes down to, the sum of the rights. And the reason we have laws and so forth is that people don't go, slit each other's throats over these things. We have a place to have them adjudicated. When the laws become folly, then people, go crazy.
Yeah. I think that's part of what's why some people are fed up about what's happening in the border. This is an issue there have been tensions for a long time, but ultimately, America is a nation of immigrants, but we're also a nation of laws. We can't if people are taking their first step in this country by breaking the law, that's a problem. That's not sustainable long term. I've been thinking about, that's the other thing I've been thinking about is the immigration issue, because I think Trump is going to win. And I think ultimately, really, it's going to be because of the immigrants, and he'll tie that to what's happening in the cities, because that's what people think about more.
Yeah.
It's not sustainable, the path that we're on.
No, I spend time on X and whatnot, and man on the street was interviewing. We want more refugees. Open the borders, whatever, in the UK, but this happened on a personal basis as well. So we interviewed everybody with placard. Would you house some of the refugees?
They don't. Do you want them in your schools? Do you want them eating your food, taking your jobs, doing anything else? I think it's visceral for people. No one wants too many. They know there's a big place in the world. Not everyone can come here.
Well, it would be kind of a funny thing. You're not necessarily helping those places per se. You are occasionally, transmitting their problems. If people think having immigrants is a net positive, well, in some regards, for some things, yes. Probably if you want to have a landscaping team and you want to have cheap labor for certain tasks, unskilled labor tasks, and the prices go down, that might work out for you. But in point of fact, if those people were huge add-ons to their own, and so forth, they would, their own countries would already be wealthy. And then it becomes down, it comes down to whether you can fix the problem of world poverty by taking everybody in. If I don't know what the number is, 7 billion people who don't live in the United States all come to the United States because it's a wonderful place. Well, it's not the United States anymore.
Yeah.
And it becomes a little bit analogous to that pool issue. If I have a really nice pool, and I could probably fit a few more people in the pool, like maybe, charge some money, I can maybe grow a second pool and so forth. It's not going to be working if the pool, takes on thousands of people simultaneously. It's not a pool anymore. And this concept of rights, again, when I say zero sum, that's generous. A lot of times it's a negative sum.
Well, yeah, exactly. Negative sum is even more of a problem. Zero sum is not so bad these days. I think I didn't think of it that way. That's the problem with the trans rights. It's not just, it's going to end women's sports. It's not just women's sports, for example, it exists because women's bodies are different than men's bodies. So they get their own category.
Thank God for that.
And trans ideology is basically that there's no physical differences. That's a matter of choice. So the end result of that will be that there will not be women's sports. You understand? That's what I'm saying. Everything is negative. They're not adding anything. They're taking things away. They're taking things away from women. They're taking away women's rights.
And there was a lot of time and effort. I'm actually, somewhat disappointed that women have not been forthright. Your, present company wives excluded. But I was listening to a Mengele episode. My wife wanted me to, and I do pretty much what she says. And she had on a lot of, gold medal winning, people, former, in the 40s and 50s, whatever, post, athletes, women athletes. I don't know if Martina Navratilova, but people on that level were on her show, and they were talking about what I like to call the William Thomas episode. The University of Penn the gentleman who cut off only a few letters on either side of Leah within his name. I think he cut off the W-I-L and the M.
Yeah.
And very little else. And he's maybe 6'3" or something like that. And they were saying, well, if she doesn't, maybe she should have her own category. Maybe she should have her own locker. Maybe she should. And
it's going to take it away. Why? It's not a right to compete in competitive sports. It's a privilege.
It's not even that. Just to get to I'm sorry to interrupt you, but that's how I roll. This is a genuine begging the question, which means you're putting something in evidence that doesn't exist. I thought all the women lost the argument before they started when they kept calling William Thomas she.
Yeah. Well, okay, that's what I'm saying. No one will really say it. There is no such thing as a trans person. You can't be in the wrong body. Yeah, I think I'm an atheist. I don't believe there's a special soul or a spirit. I don't believe there's a God solar spirit. I don't think there's a gender solar spirit either. You know what? I'm a totally male. If somehow I had been a woman, I would have been fine too. What's the big deal? What's their problem? It's a made up. I really don't understand it. It's totally, to call it mental illness is an insult to people that are mentally ill. It's a mental affectation and emotional that it goes back to what I was saying about relativism.
It's a philosophic impossibility. I mean, if I say today that I feel like a penguin, right. Leaving aside the absurdity of it, genuinely, nobody knows what their thought process is. I mean, we don't know what penguins think about being penguins. We don't know what dogs think about dogs. But whatever it is, it's part of them, and you can't necessarily access that. Everyone's always worried about cultural appropriation. You can't, I don't know, dress up as a mariachi singer to go to Halloween. Apparently, the Mexicans don't really care about that very much, but everybody else does. And there's a whole concept of the Washington Redskins, and a lot of apparently Native Americans didn't care that much, but whatever, but cultural, this is kind of an appropriation. I mean, I think I know my wife to a certain extent, and women in general, and I've met a fair number of them, and I've examined them, as a doctor, whatever, and I think I was born out of a woman, and all this kind of stuff. But the fact of the matter is, it's kind of a category mistake to think that you can feel that way, that you are that, because you can't be.
I follow. It's one of many logical impossibilities and other possibilities. That's why it's like just so stupid, Randy.
More of a, I would probably spend my time identifying as LeBron James, or Tom Brady, or I don't know, you fill in the blank,
But this goes back to what I was saying. It's an intellectual rot, because what I've discovered in the small anti-trans rights movement, such as it is almost exclusively religious people, or somewhat religious, like I'll count you, somewhat non-atheists, non-secular people. I don't even like calling myself an atheist anymore, because I don't like to ally myself with whether that's stupid Sam Harris and whatever, all those people. I call myself, as I think about it, I prefer to think of myself as secular. I'm a secular Jew. So that's what I am.
There's still hope for you.
Exactly. But in the anti-trans rights movement, it is almost all people that are observant. They might be Catholic or Protestant or Jewish or Hindu or Muslim or Sikh. They might be only mildly observant, but they're not secular / agnostic like me, that's the problem. The left has been intellectually corroded by relativist, Marxist, atheist thinking, and they're defenseless for this nonsense.
That's the thing, because life is a group sport, and just like I would not venture out to, I don't think the Denver Broncos were the best team last year, but I would not venture out on my own to play a game of football against all of them. I can't go against the Broncos. In order to go against the Broncos, I would have to organize a team, and I would have to get them trained up and all that kind of stuff. So politics is a team sport. And, you see it in the UK right now, that there are teams, and they basically made tag teams, and the referees are not impartial, unfortunately. So it's not a fair game. And so one team's taking advantage of the other team. And so there've been beatings on the street, and people getting pulled out and kicked. And we see this over time. You and I share Jewish religion, heritage, ethnicity, story, and all that kind of stuff. And generally, I think it's kind of a sadness. Jews that didn't really evangelize. Maybe they couldn't. Maybe they were barred from doing so. But the numbers are low, and it becomes a minority position almost everywhere, except in the little tiny crescent on the east side of the Mediterranean, and maybe a few other places. But even those places like New York City, it becomes not safe when you're not. Your team doesn't play hard, doesn't play. I even if I organized a rugby team, a bunch of me, type people, I would get crushed by any people, a bunch of people who know how to play rugby. And this is where, politics actually comes. And so, it's unfortunate that the media, which, by name essentially is that, that buffer, that layer between some other things, the medium, or you could look at it, there's a median strip should be in the middle. A medium is like air is a medium for feathers and dust and whatnot flowing through. So medium's got a couple different words, but it shouldn't be on one side. You wouldn't expect the medium to be only on one side. And this is where things are, because it is a team sport. So they're getting, it's a spoil system. People have their lives and livelihoods carved out and paid for by certain interests. So it becomes, a muscular assertion, not anything to do with truth. And that's where the religion part comes in, because at least you have a bit of a team. And you have some way of kind of covering it. I mean, I think there's a moral dimension as well, that you learn that thing and you identify with that team and you want to be part of that team. But, it's hard. I don't see much, I've got, say, religious friends and less religious friends and non-religious friends, whatever. And I haven't been fully religious my whole life and whatnot, but, but I think
some non-religious people seem defenseless. That's what happened, is that this sort of liberal, humanist, secular story, which my parents and my personal parents and grandparents and some family and friends have, seems to be gone. They don't believe it. No, they don't believe the left that Western society is good. They don't think, oh, gee, the first human civilization to say that slavery was bad was Western society. They say, right, the biggest slavers of all time were Western society. So I don't think
that's true. I don't think the second part's true. I think the Arabs have.
I'm just saying with the perspective, with the perspective. So we're stuck. They don't believe in, they've got nothing. They're defenseless. Marxism is an atheist ideology. That's what there's just me and my wife, and we don't really need an ideology. We go about our business, but most people seem to need one, Randy. And if they're not getting one from religion, they now appear to be getting it from left-wing fascist ideologies. I don't know. They're not. I mean, that's
yeah, no, it's an interesting point. A lot of people don't realize. I think Jonah Goldberg had the book called Liberal Fascism, probably almost 20 years ago. But the national, the NDSAP was the Nazis. That was Nazi was National Socialist, whatever that was their abbreviation. But there was National Nazi. That's the NDSAP was the National German Deutsche Socialist Arbeiterpartei. So it was a national German Socialist Workers' Party. Mm-hmm. So that doesn't sound like on the right. That's on the left, and it differed from international socialism, which was the Bolsheviks. That was communism, and they National Socialists wanted to identify within a country as opposed to being all around the world. But people don't. Everyone's calling everyone fascist all the time. But the general fascism that's happening is from the left. We see it again. Getting back to the UK right now, one of the first steps is censorship. People can't speak. And again, whether you want to call totalitarian or fascist, whatever, potato. Fascism, in a sense, is corporatism, is bringing the government.
That's how I think of it.
In line with major institutional interests, business, universities, and whatever. So everyone has to think, and say a certain way. But yeah, it's power dynamics, and they all think they're going to be on top. And people, I don't know if you're familiar with the Milgram experiment. That was, I think, done at Yale in the 50s. But people have kind of a very almost absent filter for
Because I
doing.
recall 80% of the people in the Milgram experiment kept going pretty far.
Yeah,
so like
I was unfortunately just watching an interview of a guy from ISIS. I don't know if he's in prison someplace, but you know, he literally, no joke, sadness, raped 50 young girls and 200 women. I'm not sure where he draws the line there, and murdered 900 people, but they were Yazidis, and nobody, it doesn't make the news. And but he didn't seem at all repentant about it. It's like, well, I had to do what I had to do. I was a guy, I had a sex drive, and they were telling me to do it. Yeah, whatever, you know. I mean, it's kind of a, you know, I was part of orders, you know. So he's a one-man Milgram experiment. But I think, you know, the thing is, morality is tough. You know, the people that speaking, you're talking about the slave trade. You know, I think it was Wilberforce, who was the first person in the West, as it were. It was in England that came out against slavery. But he was, you know, devoutly religious. Bonhoeffer, is the movie coming out right now, and Eric Metaxas wrote the book. But he was I think a devout Christian. And the things I think you have to have the sense. You have to make this kind of Pascalian gamble that there's a higher power in order to have the bravery. Solzhenitsyn, same thing. In order to have the bravery to put up with the stuff here, you have to believe in another world. Now, I think you can do that.
Disagree. Go ahead. Disagree. That's what I think is a problem.
That's
I'll give you my moral paragon role model, Albert Camus, who I believe was an atheist. He opposed equally, in a time similar to ours, the Stalinists and the fascists. He kept his moral equilibrium and he kept his values. I guess his philosophy is basically most people can't handle it.
Yeah,
can't handle
I agree with you.
I mean, he said, you're like Sisyphus. You roll the boulder up the hill, even though it's going to roll back down. You just keep rolling it. Most people can't handle that. They need a reward. No offense.
Yeah, I'm not disagreeing. I don't think I'm disagreeing with you. I'm saying what people do. I mean, to say that you are a brave and unique, not unique, but on the relative scale, relatively unique individual is not hyperbole. But that is axiomatic of the fact that it's unusual for people to do it on their own.
But that's what I think we need to try and build. This is good. This conversation is helping me think of as a goal. I think, for example, on various issues like protecting children from trans surgeries and procedures, we can't just be the people protecting children be religious people. Right. It's important to say we can't have all the flashpoints be religious versus secular. I mean, as I was saying, also a lot of my allies in COVID stuff, they were observant. It didn't matter if they were Sikh, Hindu, Muslim, Jewish. They were mostly observant. There are other secular atheists in the anti-COVID lockdown, COVID mandate space, but there are not that many of us. And I believe that, let's say, the freedom movement more largely, that's what I'll say, the freedom movement can't, if it becomes religious people versus non-religious people, everyone's a loser, because freedom is important for all of us. And I just think it's a mistake to let it devolve into that. And it's close to that right now.
I think you're underlining an important part.
How many people are religious that I find to be my allies on COVID-related issues.
Right. I mean, Douglas Murray, I see as a huge ally, and I'm not sure under which category he falls. He's, you know, a gay British writer, but he has a very strong backbone about all this stuff. And I might be
looking it up on my phone while you talk. I bet he's religious. They all are. I don't know.
Well, here nor there. I mean, I'm not sure. You know, Jordan Peterson, I met.
Jordan Peterson, I know is.
Well, but to varying extents, I think he's on a journey. I don't think he's willing
to. Murray, okay, that's my boy. From what I saw in my quick search, he was raised Christian, but now he thinks of himself more as agnostic. There's not that many. Douglas Murray. Jordan Peterson, I think, is observant.
Well, but my point is, I think there has to be kind of a framework and basis for children in order to come up with some of this stuff. I think, you know, we come out, you know, we're animals and we have kind of a savage way about us, and we have to be groomed in certain. I mean, groom has turned into a terrible word. We have to be kind of some things softened and aligned in a positive way, and kind of taught the golden rule. And it takes time because it's not obvious to everybody.
You need to be taught values, and what we found is,
right,
for many people that don't have a religious background, there's a dearth of values. They're not there. I mean, another way to say what I'm saying is we need secular right-wing parties everywhere, in Israel, in the United States, in Hungary, in England, and everywhere else. By right-wing, I'll just say, let's say conservative.
Yeah, I prefer conservative.
Yes.
I think it's, the left tends to build the language up, but so they come up with epithets. Everything's right wing. They don't like.
Well, here's a paradigm. Here's a way to look at it. One typical difference between the left and the right, and conservative and liberal, is that the left, progressives, they want change, and conservatives are more reluctant to change. And so I think that's a good paradigm. Certain things are changing faster than ever before in human history. Technology keeps changing more and more rapidly. We can't have, things are moving very, very fast in a lot of arenas. I guess that's why when I was younger, I was more left-wing. We just need to slow down. That's one way to look at it. Just chill.
Well, for me, it's not so much a matter of slowing down.
We understand some stuff.
It depends on what it is. For me, it's more of kind of a scientific experiment. I'm kind of a math and science guy by training, or history, and there's certain things that work. The American Revolution worked. It's an incredible document. I think it wasn't perfect. They had a pathway for amending it, but they made it difficult to amend, so you wouldn't be able to blink your eye. People all think they want democracy. Save our democracy. Well, the UK is doing democracy right now. You don't want democracy. You want a republic. Republic has a scaffolding in which you can play democracy, but democracy itself, the standard template is, 3 wolves and a sheep voting on dinner. If you're the sheep, the republic has preservation of minority rights that democracy doesn't have. What we're seeing play out in the UK, and we saw it, during COVID. I think the worst places on earth were the genuine democracy, aside from the other horrible places on earth. The worst kind of like modern Western nations were the true democracies, like Australia, New Zealand. They just vote something and boom, it's all across society. They had no recourse. We have some preservation of rights. We have a republic and we have federalism. So we have different states that could incubate, different experimental versions. So we at least had Florida and South Dakota and certain other places that were less draconian than say Minnesota, Pennsylvania, New York, blah, blah, blah. And so, I'm not sure what my point here is, but as far as the parties, I know conservative, so the way I look at this is to try to conserve the things that work. I think the American founding works. Again, getting back to my spirit animal, Andrew Clavin, he basically, doesn't like the term conservative. He says, I am of the founding. I am pro-founding fathers. I believe in the templated Constitution, that has a minimal power going towards the sovereigns, the top, that restores rights to the people, that the genuine rights are God-given, and you may not like the term, but basically not to be taken by the government.
That's the problem. You're going my whole point. The right wing, we don't need to fetishize the Constitution, and you're missing the whole left. The left doesn't care. They want to have certain rights. They don't worship the Constitution. They don't think God wrote it. God didn't write it. Men wrote it, and they're correct. White men, many of whom owned slaves, wrote it. So they weren't actually moral paragons. I'm with them. They were great. They wrote an amazing document, but I don't worship the Constitution either. The Constitution is a functional document. Its goal is to help us achieve certain other things. It's not an end in itself.
Well, it's a rule book. Okay? Getting back to the Denver Broncos, whatever. But the Denver Broncos, any football team, any team in general, there's a bunch of strong guys, and many of them have violent tendencies. And so when you have them play football, they're playing according to the Constitution of the NFL.
But there's a goal in football to win a game. What's the?
I understand that, but they can't bring a knife. Okay, you could theoretically, if you wanted to win the game, you take out Russell Wilson or Tom Brady. You knife him, you club him, whatever, and then you win the game. No, you can't do that because there are rules, and basically the rules of any sporting engagement, the reason that the hockey players can hit each other and they don't get arrested afterwards is because they have certain rules. Was this a fair hit? And within the constraints, they understand people are going to get hurt now and then, but they have constraints about what they can and cannot do. That's what we need all the way. And I don't think the NFL is a religious organization. And the fact that
the constraints, it's different. Football is a contest with a goal to win the game. Life is not a contest. The Constitution has a goal to maximize human happiness, I guess you could say, or others might say to constrain the power of government or whatever. That's the difference, Randy.
Right.
There's no agreement on what everyone agrees that the rules of football are binding.
No, I appreciate it. I'm just saying that they have similarities insofar as they're providing safety for the participants. Now, the Constitution, obviously, it's not the NFL. We're not living in the NFL, but the concept is that you have a certain set. Getting back to rights, you have a certain set of rights, and your neighbor has a certain set of rights, and those get adjudicated through government, as opposed to my shooting. I mean, basically, you go back to Afghanistan, and they have tribes, and they have tribal rules, and they probably have some system of laws is not necessarily written down. People will always come up with something. The question is, is there fairness? Is there possible growth? Can you, move up according to your abilities and so forth? If you're in a tribal society, probably not. You're somewhat constrained whom you can marry. Everything's going to be determined for you. And that has been life. Life's default position, I think, is without these type of rules and whatnot. And it's kind of been, I think it was Hobbes who said nasty, brutish, and short. And that's the way life has almost always been. So we have the potential of flowering. And again, is the U.S. Constitution the most perfect document ever written? No, but it's probably the best one of its type. And It's clearly served as a reasonable model. And so a conservative, getting back to my original point, a conservative is one who says that's been a pretty gosh darn goodly model for a goodly length of time. You just want to overturn it because sadness. Because
they're missing it. The left wings, they don't say they're overturning it. The Supreme Court said that there was a right to privacy in the Constitution. That's why there was Roe v. Wade. That's what they said. So they didn't say no abortions in America. It's not a right in the Constitution, but we're going to guarantee it anyways. You understand? They pretend. Everyone, it's yeah. I just don't think. Ultimately, it's the group of people that agree. If you take God out of it, then it's just a piece of paper. And people have to agree on what it means. Otherwise, it doesn't have any force either. Well,
yeah, but that's what happens. Again, that you have interested party, getting back to the NFL, everyone agrees. Every now and then they change the rule. They make an amendment. They change the kickoff. They, have bigger helmets.
Everyone agrees to play by the rules.
Yeah, but again, they all have to have rules, because otherwise you're just going to have a bunch of guys who are brutes who bang into each other, and then you'll play King of the Hill, which is an okay game, I guess. But if you have very, very strong, powerful men with violent tendencies, people might just get more than hurt. So that's the way that fun happens. It's not fun to be kind of gang killed and tackled. I mean, if you had 12 guys who were just as strong as any football player, and it's just you, and they whatever, it's no fun. That's murder potentially. Yeah. But if you confine it to the rules, it can be very entertaining. And again, this is kind of, actually, I interviewed Daniel Flynn, who wrote The War on Football, and one of his, people have been warring against football just like they war against the Constitution, usually from the left also.
Yeah.
But absent the conservative sees football as an imperfect institution. Say people, there might be concussions, people get hurt, they tear the ACL, blah blah blah. Maybe it promotes a certain kind of violent machismo or masculinity, toxic masculinity. But absent football, the same kids on the street, they might just join gangs. I mean, there is a tendency that guys want to do something. And if you can channel LeBron James, not playing basketball, with a kind of a crack cocaine addicted mother and no identifiable father, on his own, that would have been a very, very scary kind of guy potentially. He got adopted by a police officer family, and apparently he was, I'm not sure how much religion there was or was not, but there was the religion of discipline and what you can and can't do, and there were rules. And so LeBron, I think, I don't think he's a perfect individual, but as far as basketball players, have come and gone, he's pretty close to perfect. And he couldn't craft his body. I mean, that was, God's gift or genetic gift or whatever you want to call it. But you have to have constraints. And so this is the conservative vision that people thrive under a certain amount of constraints. And that's, what the left, doesn't, the left just wants, I don't know, whatever it happens to want at the moment, devil may care, almost literally devil may care, as we saw in parts of the Olympics.
I don't totally agree with you, but I hear you.
So did you watch the Olympics? And I just want to talk about Olympics a little bit, because did Jennifer, she was an athlete, correct? Was she an Olympian?
She never made it to the Olympics. She won the national championship in 1986. And so Olympics was 84 and 88. So she peaked at the wrong time. But yeah, I'm sort of disgusted by the whole Olympic movement. It was tainted for me by having the male boxers, but there were some cool runners. I watched a couple of the races. It's still fun. It's too many sports too. I feel like it should just be a few runners and swimmers ultimately. Like it's like this whole, the old, I forget who said, an old Roman, just give them bread and circuses. That's what I feel like. I don't know. It's disappointing to me. It's not the Olympics I remember. Remember Bruce Jenner in 1976?
Yeah.
When he won that? That was fun. I was just reading about him. He's a her now. But he went to the Olympics in 1972. He came in 10th place. And he decided that he wanted to come back, train as hard as he could, and try and come back in 4 years and win. And he was jealous. The Russian guy won it in 72 because his full-time job was training. So Bruce Jenner came back and he trained. He was the first time 6 to 8 hours a day, and he worked selling insurance in the evening. And then he did it. He won in 76. He crushed everyone. And then he retired and he never competed again. So that's my favorite Olympic story. Like, it's just so cool. He decided what to do. He did it, and then he quit. That's what sports should be to me. Not, what does this mean you're an athlete? You spend 20 years playing. I mean, LeBron James, you're a full-time basketball player forever? What is there to do? What do you keep doing?
Well,
all every day?
So I think there's a life. I mean, you can argue that maybe 5,000 years ago there wouldn't be a place for that per se. But
no time until like 50 years.
We have actors, we have fully paid actors, we have influencers. We have people that are far less necessary in a sense, but people like entertainment. They like vision. They like templates. Getting back to the kids who are doing better playing football than not. Mm-hmm. We have regular DNA, as you point out on your shirt, but we also have themed DNA. We have a story, and we have a common story within us, and we have, especially guys, we have the need for the heroic arc, and we have destiny, and we need to kind of see it in front of us. I mean, people, you can argue that almost every Disney movie is the same, every Marvel movie is the same, every comic book's the same. There's basically the protagonist, there's the action, there's the defeat, there's the return, there's the triumph, there's the glory, etc. This is.
Are they really all the same? I guess.
One form or another, like every love story, every story in general. So we need that because I don't know. I can't say why we need it, but we do, and we need it to get through our lives and to make ourselves the best and most functional. Now, is being the best and most functional the best thing, or should you just kind of sit and absorb? There's like 100-pound guy in 900-pound man every now and then you see on some of these. Whatever TV, whatever, and he's living. He's not.
Well, there's a place for a contemplative lifestyle, not so much in Western culture, but in some other cultures where you're just contemplative. I think it's a good word for it. You don't have to be 900 pounds.
Yeah, but you have to be supported.
Contemplating.
You have to be supported by somebody.
Sure.
And so that's the thing. Because I mean, I've been a doc. I was I got my medical degree in 1981. And my experience is most people over the course of their lives need to eat, and in order to do so, you have to get food, and you either are given it or you have to go get it. Yeah. And if you earn it, and so if somebody's paying for it, well then fine, you can be contemplative. I think part of the problem that brought about Al Qaeda, for instance, is that people could be contemplative without any cost themselves. They were fabulously, there was like 15 out of I forget what the number was, the total number, they had 15 out of 18 or something like that. They're all Saudis, and they're all wealthy. They're wealthy guys, and they're hanging out doing a lot of thinking. So what, I'm not quite where, where Arbeit macht frei, written on Auschwitz. I mean, but I think it was cynical and sarcastic on their point. But I don't disagree with the concept that work does, make you free. It does give you motivation. It does, give you a place and a way of being in the world, and it gives you confidence. So I think it's a genuine happiness in order to be doing things. Having work is people hate it. They hate getting up in the morning, blah blah blah. But absent that, then they're aimless. That's
they don't know how to spend their time if they don't have that. It's fun for most people for a few weeks, and like, what am I supposed to do all day?
Yeah. So let me ask you, what's been your kind of like goal and work in general? I know you're an attorney.
That's what I'm saying. I'm a more contemplative guy. I'm lucky because I do have someone. Jennifer works and she makes the money. And if I didn't have kids to take care of, I wouldn't want to sit. So, because they go to school. So we got the two youngers. That's like a half-time job. I do feel like the world is moving really fast. And I try and just think about stuff and process it a little bit away from the mainstream media narrative. And it's a privilege, no doubt, as you say. If I didn't have my wife working and supporting the family, I couldn't do it. But I'm 55. I wasn't like this my whole life. But yeah, I've been thinking a lot. I started thinking about the trans stuff because of Jennifer's company. There's no one thinking about it. I'm not saying. I'm pretty smart. If I think about something for a few hours, I have a lot of good thoughts. It's not all just reading. It's literally just thinking, Randy. There's no one thinking about stuff. There's no one thinking about what it means.
There's two of us.
I know. I'm just saying it's hard. Most people are busy. Their brain has stuff they need to think about. If you have a job, you sort of have to think about the stuff in your job. You can't just sit there and say, oh, what do I want to think about right now? People are reading or doing. I like my word contemplative. There's a place for it in a lot of societies. But not in Western society. We privilege like being busy, productive. I like those things too. But there's a place. There's how many billion did you say? 7 billion. There's a lot of us out there.
Yeah, I've kind of lost track. I was counting the other day. I got up to like 1,000 or so, and I forget exactly. But I noticed you were on a docket with Mark Changizi and
I'll tell you about it. Then I have to go. That is such a bummer. We were actually the first lawsuit against the federal government for COVID censorship before a lot of the more famous cases. And like the more famous cases, we were thrown out because supposedly we didn't have standing. It was myself, Mark Changizi, and Michael Sanger, and we were represented by NCLA Legal, which did the Missouri v. Biden, whatever they call it now. Mirtha, Janine Eunice was our attorney as well. She was a very important driver. But yeah, we finally went all the way up to the Supreme Court. They refused to hear the case. It was never seen on the merits. The case. To me, I just wish Berenson's case is still alive. Berenson v. Biden. I never cared. I want to see. I think there's direct orders from the government telling Twitter what to do. Yeah. And that was always my dream. And Berenson still wants that.
Well, I just can't believe that the Murphy case was originally Biden v. Missouri, whatever it was.
Yeah.
Jay bought a charge. I listened to Jay's lecture in Boston like 4 months ago, and I tweeted it, and I love Jay, and we had dinner afterwards. But I can't believe they didn't pass it. I mean, I don't know how much more standing you can have.
Well, this goes back. This is a topic for another conversation. What I was telling you is that God didn't write these laws. The judges don't care. There's no it's not real. It's just pretend. They can do whatever they want. Whether they're Supreme Court justice, if they want to say abortion is a right in the Constitution, they'll say it's in the Constitution. If they want to say it's not in the Constitution,
they'll say it's not in the Constitution, Randy. Yeah, it doesn't matter.
But but the fact of the matter is, it was literally was not in the Constitution. There is no word abortion.
But it was the law of the land, and a large majority. Was it 9-0 when they voted on Roe v. Wade?
No.
Sure. What? I think they got.
We'll go back. That's we'll check that.
You know, this is yes. My memory used to be better. It was not close vote. I don't remember. I used to know stuff. It was the law of the land for 50 years. It was a constitutional right for over 40 years.
All right. So
anyone could say now, anyone who wants to could say,
laws
the Constitution, or they could say it's not. That's my point. Those are both valid arguments. There's no right answer because there's no God to say it is or it isn't in there. So you can say whatever you want.
Well, there is. You can leave God aside, but there is the concept of morals, and the laws wind up reflecting the morals of that society. I imagine it's legal to have 9 wives in Saudi Arabia.
I don't know. I think it's not. But
the morals and ethics of the
society.
Not
legal in Utah anymore.
I understand, because the morals and ethics or the power structure.
The morals and ethics of the society change, and the laws reflect those.
Yeah, so people oftentimes can't be prosecuted for crimes happening under the law. That's why the slaveholders, founders, that was kind of, it's kind of silly to look at things contextually. That is who the landholders were. That's what people were there doing, and that was kind of it certainly wasn't unique to the United States in the 18.
Well, as you probably know, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, they all had slaves.
And so you can find them. You can find them in Mauritania. You can find them. There's basically one step away from slavery in parts of Pakistan and Afghanistan. There's kind of chattel slavery in large parts of the world, and indentured servitude and so forth. I don't think it's as nearly unique as people think it is. The opposite. I don't think it's obliterated the way people think it is. So Daniel, let's get back to your thesis.
Last thoughts, because they asked me last questions, and I had to go pick up the kids at camp.
Right. So last questions. You never voted for a Republican for president?
No. And
I'm going to pull up that tweet.
Yeah.
I'll be right back, but keep talking.
Yes, I'll keep talking. So I'll give a backstory. I was against COVID lockdowns even before they were announced. So I was agitating against them in March of 2020. In April of 2020, to many of my followers on Twitter that like to keep reminding me that lockdowns happen on Donald Trump, I'm aware. I don't think Donald Trump did a great job on COVID. He's not comparable what he did with Kamala Harris and the Democrats did. Lockdowns, mask mandates, vaccine passports, those are all initiatives of the Democrat Party. Trump should have fought against them, but he's not particularly responsible for them. So I renounced the Democrat Party in April of 2020. I told my wife I would never vote for them again. I was repulsed because they embraced the lockdowns and censorship, and then mask mandates and vaccine mandates, and in short, tyranny. So there was no chance I was voting for Biden in 2020. I was close to voting for Trump, but then I was still mad at him because of not fighting against the Democrats more. And then I was not going to vote, but then I voted for the Libertarian in the last second. But this time, I'm very excited to vote for Trump. I'm happy with Trump. I like him. I think he's grown a lot as a person. And I thought this before he stood up after an assassination attempt and said, fight, fight, fight. So I'm actually, this is not like a begrudging vote for Trump. I'm very excited. I think he's the man of the hour. I think he has the best chance of anyone of fighting to redeem our American freedoms as guaranteed in the Constitution, although only written by men, not divinely inspired.
Well, when you say
an incredible document written by amazing geniuses that has proven itself one of the greatest founding document any country has.
Right. So just getting to one word though, then, and when you say moral, what's the basis of morality?
Well, that is a hard question for those of us that don't have a religious basis. Yuval Noah Harari, who I think is a very interesting, important thinker, although he's very dangerous, his point of view on it is there's religious people and they believe silly stories. I sort of share that view. And he said, and then there was a liberal humanist story, and that's also silly stories. So now we're stuck with nothing. Well, he's describing what's happened to the global left. I still sort of believe in the liberal humanist story. What I do, Randy, is I do as if there were a God. God to me is a metaphor. God is
that's your soul. That's your soul right there.
Well, I'm familiar. That's why like I said, I don't really call myself an atheist, but yes, to me, God is not literally true, but God is a metaphor. So I guess
God probably sees you the same way.
See, God doesn't have vision. What kind of God would see the way we did?
I was joking. I was joking. There's apparently a joke between an atheist comes up to a rabbi or whatever and says, I don't believe in God, and the rabbi says, the God you don't believe in is one I also don't believe in.
Well, I'm answering your question seriously. I think what I use on a practical basis for morality is a version of John Rawls. Are you familiar with his veil of ignorance? So he was an important thinker 40, 50 years ago. He said to figure out if something was moral or a society was moral, pretend you didn't know who you were going to be born into. Like you were going to be born into America. Well, you didn't know if you'd be a man or a woman. You didn't know if you'd be straight or gay, trans or not trans, whatever you believe, whatever. And what sort of society? Think about the society that you would want that would make things nice for the weaker, less important people, like that. So I think that's just some tool you can use. I think it is possible if you try and put yourself in the shoes of other people. And so I tried to think, okay, what if I was a 12-year-old boy and I really wanted to be a girl? I don't care. I was like, that's tough shit. I would tell myself, just deal, you're a boy, just be a boy. There's nothing you could do as a girl that you can't do as a boy, and vice versa. So you try and put yourself. So yes, this can cause, this is my method. So I think if I was a Palestinian, what would I do? I would like to think I'd be resisting Hamas and be a peace advocate. Maybe I wouldn't, and I'd be angry and I'd be throwing bombs. But if I'm a person who rapes or kills children, that's bad no matter who I am. So, yeah, Yuval Noah Harari would say that I'm fooling myself, and I believe in silly stories too. But I think there is a way to have a morality away from any sort of deity.
Well, we could go on and on. Now you have to go get your kids.
Yes, I do.
And
theology, that's a deep trap.
I assume your kids, my kids are adults, but I assume your kids, like my kids, both came from a man and a female.
They did.
So I'm going to end. I'm just going to give a quick self-promotion. If people want to help support my podcast and find things out in general, they can go buy my book. It's called Overturning Zika, the pandemic that never was. People might have forgotten about it, but I haven't. And if you read this, you won't. And it's kind of an amazing story of the biggest pandemic in the history of Earth until COVID. And a lot of the same characters, a lot of the same foolish antics, and hilarity ensued. Dr. Fauci, the WHO, and all that kind of stuff. And nobody's going on about why it disappeared, except for me, apparently. He's weird. So I'm kind of the world's
No one talks about it. You're like a top Zika expert. I think that's a great.
Well, it's a funny thing. Yeah. I mean, it's not like I never heard of Zika when I was in medical school, and I didn't even hear about it until, obviously, nobody did until it happened. And they picked this really obscure dengue virus. And I'm not going to get deep into the story, but it's a fascinating one. I commend people to read it. At least buy the book. Reading would be fun.
Reading it is less important, but yeah, it's definitely one of the most important books on Zika out there. I can vouch for it, and I think someone, maybe the WHO or CDC or someone,
declared monkeypox an emergency again today.
Oh my God, they just never ever stop. They never ever stop.
Write another book on monkeypox.
Well, I actually have some intention of doing something like that. I might do a piece on monkeypox because I wrote an article on Donald McNeil in the New York Times, a guy who basically go medieval on the coronavirus. He's Dr. Fauci's voice box in February 2020, March 2020 in New York City. Anyway, that's kind of why we got into a lot of this crap. Anyway, he's a monkeypox-ist.
Oh my God.
On his Substack, once he got kicked out of the New York Times for completely different reasons. Anyway, but he's got a book on the what is it? The wisdom of plagues. He wrote a book.
They want plagues. All right, I got to stop talking because we could talk about plagues is our topic. We could talk about that all day.
All right, so you have a lovely rest of afternoon. Thank you for being on. Appreciate it.
Talk to you. Bye.